This is myths and legends of Japan and how they correlate with modern multimedia. So I'll explain briefly what this panel is about, go over a few myths, briefly touch on yokai, and then give some examples of myths, legends, and yokai in modern multimedia so that we can have it's just going to be a brief overview so y'all can go out and start knowing what to look for. So this panel will basically touch on the different myths and legends of Japan and how they have continued through the years and how they still show up in our current manga and anime, video games, and books, and how it's just the country still holds on to its history through these stories. Okay. Yeah. So we're briefly going to go over some of the gods real quick. This is Izanagi and Izanagi. They're kind of like the two mains. They created the islands of Japan, and they created numerous gods and goddesses. This is Amaterasu. She's the sun goddess, the main deity of the Shinto religion. She was born from Izanagi's left eye, and she ruled over the heavens. This is Tsukiyomi. He is the god of the moon. He was married to Amaterasu, and he's born from Izanagi's right eye. They gave birth to him so that there could be a companion for the great and beautiful Amaterasu, and he's supposed to be somewhat equal to her beauty, but she hated him, so they decided, okay, she'll go in the morning and you'll be the night so you never have to see each other. This is Susanoo. He is basically the brat of the family. He was given reign of the sea, but refused to do the job. He's known for his bad temper and tantrums that destroy lands, and he was born from Izanagi's nose, so that might be why he's really snotty. He killed the great 8-headed serpent Yamata no Orochi. This is Raijin and Fujin. They are the gods of thunder and wind. Raijin will beat on his drums to cause the thunder, and Fujin will release the wind from his double-ended sack. These are tanukis. They are a little mischievous. They're called a raccoon dog, or in some instances the translation will be of a badger. They actually exist. There's this really cute looking raccoon dog, and unfortunately a lot of the artificial fur that you think is just fake fur, it's actually from raccoon dogs. They're mischievous tricksters. They can disguise themselves into anything or as objects or monsters, and sometimes if they're not that good or adept at changing into things, you might still see the tail. So if you see a teapot that's grown a tail, it's probably not just a teapot. So one of the first legends, one of my favorites, is Isunboshi, and he's like the inch-high priestling. There was an older couple and they had wished for a son, and suddenly one day they were gifted with a son, except he was really, really small. And as he grew up, he didn't grow. So, they could give him just a few grains of rice would be enough for him. And when he was around 11 or so, he really, really wanted to go out on adventures and be a samurai. So he told his parents, I'm going to go beyond the lake and go to the capital, to the city, to try and become a samurai. And they were really worried for him, but they wished him well and wished him on his way. So they gave him a needle for a sword and a piece of straw to use as a scabbard, and they gave him a rice bowl to use to float down the river and a chopstick to use as a paddle. So he rode and rode and rode until he came to the capital. And then he decided he was going to keep walking until he got to the grandest house he could find and decided he was going to go there and make a name for himself with the inhabitants. And the house actually was home to a great lord. So Isenboshi was brought before the Lord, and the Lord was really impressed with this amusing itty bitty guy. And Isenboshi was like, I want to become a samurai and, work in your house. And he's like, okay, dude, why don't you guard my daughter? So he becomes the bodyguard of the great lord's beautiful daughter, Haruhime. And Haruhime and Isenboshi become great friends. So over the years, he's protecting her, practicing his swordsmanship, and they're just becoming good pals. So one day, there are some cherry trees that are blooming nearby a temple, and Haruhime wants to go see them. So they make a little procession, and Isenboshi, as her guard, goes with them. And as they're almost there, a great demon jumps out, and he's got this magical hammer with him. And he tries to kidnap the princess, and he scares off all the other attendants because they're all useless. And then Isenboshi starts trying to swipe at his leg, and all it really feels is like, a bug stinging him. And the demon thinks it's nothing but a bug, so he picks him up and swallows him. And Haruhime is really sad by this and was crying after Isenboshi. And the demon was laughing and about to take the princess when he starts doubling over in pain, holding his stomach, because Isenboshi from the inside was stabbing him and slicing him. And the demon's like, please stop, please, I'm sorry, I promise I'll be good. And then Isenboshi from inside him shouts out, fine, I'll stop, but you must open up your mouth and stick out your tongue. So the demon did, and Isenboshi comes back up and says to the demon, now you must leave, never come back, never try to kidnap her again, or I will keep at this. And the demon promises, Isenboshi jumps out, and the demon runs away. So Haruhime comes over to him and is thanking him, glad that he's still alive. And then she notices that the Oni, the demon, had dropped his hammer. So she picks it up and she says to Isenboshi, this is a magical hammer. It can grant you one wish. What is it that you would wish, Isenboshi? And he said, I wish I was tall, like a regular boy. So she waved the hammer a few times and chanted, Isenboshi grow to 6 feet tall. And every time she waved the hammer, he grew and grew and grew, until standing before her was a tall, young, handsome man. And they both traveled back to the house, and they eventually married, and he did become a samurai. This one is another one of my favorites. This is Bamboku. As you can see, it's a tea kettle with a head. Bamboku is a tanuki. So he was walking along one day, getting up to his badgerly mischief like usual, and he goes through these reeds and did not notice that there was a snare. So he's busy. One thing tanukis like to do is they like to bang on their stomach like a drum, and it makes kind of like a pat-a-pon sound. And he was so busy enjoying himself and ends up stepping into the snare, and it draws him up. So he's, crying for help and screaming and, generally worried. And then along comes this old lonely tinker, and he comes up and sees the badger, and he's like, oh, you poor creature. And so he unties the snare, and he's like, there you go, you're free now, go on to your own home. And he starts to go away, and the badger's like, wait, let me repay you for your kindness. And he says, no, that's okay. He's like, no, really, let me repay you. And he says, you can repay me by journeying on to your own home. Have a good day. So the tinker goes to leave, and he's fixing his pack and putting it on his back to go, and it kind of opens. And as he's walking on, Bamboku uses his magic to transform himself into a teapot, and he runs and jumps into the sack. So the tinker doesn't notice and gets home. And as he's unloading his wares, he notices that there's this really interesting teapot. And he's like, this teapot is just way too fine and ornamental for me. So what I should do is I should give this to the local priest, because he'll really enjoy this teapot more than I, because I'm just a poor, lonely tinker. So he gives it as a gift to the priest, and the priest does indeed believe it is a very beautiful and fantastic teapot. So he takes it and thanks the tinker. So the priest then calls his friends, and he's like, we must have a viewing party. So they come over, and he sets a silk cloth out and sets the teapot in the middle, and his friends are like, oh yes, this really is an amazing teapot. We should have a tea ceremony. So they go out in the garden to try and set up for the ceremony. Meanwhile, the priest begins making the tea, puts water in the teapot, and sets it on over the fire to heat up. After a few minutes, suddenly the teapot sprouts legs, starts shaking, a head and a tail, and starts shouting, oh, it's too hot, it's too hot. Jumps off the fire and starts running around the room saying, it's too hot, it's too hot. And the priest is mortified, and he yells, and his friends and attendants come in to see what's wrong, and they see the teapot running around the room yelling, hot, hot, hot. So the friends are like, screw this, and run away. And the attendants are, looking after the priest, and then the teapot, stops, and the legs go up, and they're like, what's going on, master? And he's like, the teapot, it's cursed. And he tells them what happened, so the attendants go and they start poking it and prodding it with sticks, trying to get it to do things, and it doesn't do anything else. And the priest is like, nah, screw this. Calls the tinker back, says, take your cursed teapot and go. So the tinker takes the teapot home, and he just decides to set it up in a nice place. And he goes to sleep. Well, that night he's woken up by a, hey, tinker sound, hey. And he wakes up to this whiskery face in his own. And the face, it turns out to be the same badger. And he goes, hey, I'm the badger that you saved. I'm the teapot. I disguised myself as a teapot so that I could help repay you. And I figured you would just try to sell me and you could take the money and live off it. But you proved too kind-hearted for that. So I have another idea of how I can help you. I'm actually the Tanuki Prince, Bamboku. I can use my magic to turn into a teapot, and what I want us to do is we can go travel around the area, and you can make money by putting on a show for a magic dancing teapot. So that's what they do. The Lonely Tinker and Bamboku travel around. They play, the Tinker plays music, and Bamboku sprouts legs and dances around. And after a few years of this, the Tinker now has enough money that he can spend the rest of his days living comfortably. And around that time, Bamboku comes up to him and he says, my old friend, it has been a joy and a pleasure to be with you. Unfortunately, the magic is fading and I can never change back again, and it is time for me to go. So even though the Tinker was really sad, he was happy for his friend, and he watched as Bamboku turned back into a teapot and stayed a teapot forever. So the Tinker was able to live out the rest of his days in peace and comfort, and he took the teapot back to the priest and told him the story of Bamboku. And the same priest who was scared earlier was like, wow, this really is a majestic teapot. And he places it in a place of honor, making sure it never goes on a fire again. And so people can come and view the teapot that used to be the great Tanuki prince, Bamboku. So some legends are about fox legends, and it's really interesting because majority of these were actually adapted from China and Korea. There's a good bit of Japanese myths and legends that were adapted from other countries, and they just took their own spin on it. But foxes, also known as kitsune, they're spirits, and they can have up to 9 tails. It's said every 100 to 1,000 years, they'll grow a new tail. The more tails you have, the more powerful and higher ranking you are. They are tricksters, they're greedy, they're vengeful, and most possessions are thought to be by fox demons when someone's taken over and acting weirdly. Another thing that appears in a lot of anime, or some animes that I've seen, are butterflies. And these are possibly from Chinese myths. It's a bit hard to pinpoint it down, but it is believed to be the souls of the dead. One of those that you'll see that in a lot is actually Bleach, when the souls are turned into butterfly to go to the afterlife. So this is Jimmu Tenno, and he is said to be the first emperor of Japan, and he is to be the great-great-grandson of Amaterasu herself. And that is why they say the emperors are descendants of the gods. So all the lines of the emperors that are currently still in Japan, just it's more of kind of like this position, and then they have another leader overall. But they're still revered as the family descended from the goddess Amaterasu. So seinen are another thing that come up. It loosely translates into mountain hermit, and they were thought to have supernatural powers. They're like really, really powerful samurai, but on a next level. So they usually live by themselves in the mountains, and usually the seinen in the myth have a toad companion known as Gamma. So that may sound familiar to some.
Very sage.
So yokai is another fun section. I love yokai. Yokai are basically mysterious, unexplainable, and unknown events or creatures. It has just such a wide range from things that will help you, things that just exist, and things that love to scare you for the sake of scaring, and things that want to kill you.
Human face dog.
Yes. So they can be good, bad, or tricksters, look humanoid, demonic, goblin-like, or be everyday items. There are actually a class of musical instrument yokais, and it's believed that items after 100 years of care will turn into yokai. So there's even a classification of yokai that are household items like dishes and china. There's even this one little yokai that is made up of all the broken china, and it has like a little teapot top for a hat, and it uses a fork and a knife for a spear and a sword. And it's even though it really just wants to try and hurt you, most people view it as an adorable little thing because it doesn't do as much damage. Some are thought to be made up to teach lessons or scare children into behaving. For instance, Akaname, he's one of my favorites. A lot of the pictures you'll see of Akaname are going to be like this really kind of ugly red looking thing, kind of scraggly black hair, but he has like this tongue longer than Gene Simmons. And what he does is he'll go into the bathrooms at night, and you'll hear this slurping sound of him licking the scum off the floors. Now, the reason it's believed that this was created to try and encourage children to clean the bathrooms is because the old style form of Japanese bathrooms were a lot of tile. And since you would wash yourself and then you'd get into the bath just to relax, a lot of steam would build up in there, a lot of moisture, so a lot of scum would build up and you would have to constantly maintain it. So that's one reason why it was believed, but you know, they would try to tell children, it's like, if you don't clean the bathtub, then Akaname is gonna come. So it's like if you can imagine getting up to go into the bathroom in the middle of the night and you're sitting on the toilet and you hear this of something next to you behind the shower curtain.
Somebody's getting head.
So, some myths, legends, and yokai in modern multimedia. One of the first ones to mention, obviously, would be Yokai Watch. It's definitely an interesting little anime. It's pretty much has nothing but yokai in it. It does do a different spin on the different types of yokai. Several of them, I think some of them are just kind of added in, but it does have some of the traditional yokai, like there's one, I feel so bad I forget its name because it's one of my favorites. It's a giant wall, and its job is to block you. You'll be walking along the path and it'll be like, nope. Try to go this way, nope. And it won't move. Like it'll just be there. And sometimes it'll open its eyes to look at you to see if you're going away. And it's hard to get around it. There are other yokai that I've seen on there. Let's see, what were some of the others? Kappa. Kappa's another one of my favorite yokai that appears on there. The Kappa that I've seen on there, though, he's more kind of laid back, surfer dude. But Kappas can actually be pretty cool. There are stories of Kappas being good, but mostly of being bad. Kappas normally live in water, and they've got this weird little dip in the top of their heads, and that's where the water is held, and it's believed that that's their source of power. So what Kappas will do is they wait at the edge, and when someone comes too close to the water, they will grab them and pull them under to drown them and then eat them. Other legends say that because back then, this is another one that it's thought about, created for needing caution, because back in early Japan, didn't have toilets. What would you do walking along? You'd squat by a river and go. So one of the legends of the Kappa is that if you're squatting by the river trying to do your business, if you're not careful, the Kappa will come up, stick its hand up your bum to grab your intestines and pull it out. Or it would grab your tongue and pull you out through your rear end. And it was also believed that there was this ball of energy that existed in humans, and that lived in your intestines, which is what they would try to pull out. There's also stories of that if you're sitting on a public toilet and you hear kind of a noise, that you might want to get up because that could be a Kappa coming up through the pipes. Ways that once you see a Kappa that you can get away are they're very respectful. So if you're like, bow to it first, it will bow back. But bow really low, because then it will bow low in return and the water will spill out of its head and it'll lose its power. So it will have to try and regain the water and you can run away. Kappas also really like cucumbers. So you can persuade it with a cucumber to try and be like, well, I know I look good, but how about these? And there have been stories where it'll take the cucumber instead and leave you be. Another one that's my favorite, it's a really old anime, one of the oldest running ones actually. Started out as a shadow theater, then went into a weekly manga, then into manga, then into anime. And this has been going, the story itself has been going since around 1913 to 1923 onwards. So there's been movies, there's been, from the 1960s to 1980 was the first run of the anime. Then in the 1980s it was picked up again, went to the 2000s, and it's just really cool. It's called Gegege no Kitaro, and literally means Kitaro of the graveyard. He's a young boy who's half human, half yokai, and he tries to protect the balance between humans and yokai. Protect yokais from humans while protecting humans from yokai.
Thank you.
He keeps his hair over his eye because that eye is actually missing. And his father, when he died, he was so sad that Kitaro would be by himself, so he managed to come back as just an eyeball with a body and legs and arms. So he's called Papa Eyeball, and he usually stays on Kitaro and kind of tries to guide him. But it's a really, really cool show, and it shows a lot of yokai. Like, the big one in the background, that's the wall that'll try and block you. The one next to it is, I believe that's Itomomen, and it's this giant roll of paper, which it helps them out, and they can fly on him. But in Legends, Itomomen will, it'll help you fly, but first it's gonna wrap itself around you and kind of strangle you as it flies you off, or fly you to a high place and drop you. And then this one, though the little old man is smiling, he's actually kind of creepy, because his ability is he will make the sound of a baby crying. So people will come to look for it, and then they'll see this weird kind of, he'll look like a baby, and they'll try to pick him up. But when they pick him up, he starts growing heavier and heavier and heavier until he crushes you to death. So it's really interesting. Several yokai that they feature that are their friends are some of the ones that in the myths they're like really cruel. But it's really an interesting series to check out because of how long it runs. As a really cool theme song, kind of creepy. I love it. And it's a really cool anime and manga to check out if you want to learn more about yokai. Another one that mentions yokai is Nororion no Mago. And this anime not only features yokai, but it also features something called the Thousand Demon Night Parade. And that is basically what it sounds like, that every now and then there will be a gathering of about 1,000 demons, and in night, around midnight, they will march through the towns. One that has a few legends is Dragon Ball series, and that one, so this one of the main ones would be Master Roshi. He is technically a seinen. His name loosely means turtle hermit. And aside from being a big pervert, he's a seinen. The series itself is actually based off of a Chinese story called Journey into the West, which features a character whose name is very similar to Son Goku, and he flies around on a giant cloud. So the creator of Dragon Ball has mentioned before that they really, really loved the story Journey to the West growing up, so they actually created the series Dragon Ball. And a lot of the earlier series is just kind of like his own spin on Journey into the West. Yep. And then pan is also, not only it's a type of bread, like if you look into it, I was very interested to find out that pretty much everyone's name in that show is after some type of food or kitchen item. But Pan is also a mischievous goat hybrid in Greek mythology. So Pokemon actually has a lot of different myths. One of the ones is Ho-Oh, and it's based off of the Chinese phoenix Feng Guang, which Japanese also adapted into their own phoenix. Raikou, Suicune, and Entei represent some of the gods, Raijin, Fujin, and Raiju. Raijin and Fujin for, thunder and lightning. Suicune is based off of wind, as well as the styling for Entei is based off of Raiju, who is the dog companion to the god Raijin. Ninetales and Vulpix are based on the Kitsune and the Trickster Fox. It's also thought that Zoroark and Zora are based off of Tanukis, kind of, because of the fact that they can turn into humans to trick, which is also something Kitsune can do, and that depending if they're not that good, they may still have a tail showing, like the Tanuki tend to do. I always say this wrong, I apologize. Mawile is one of my favorite because she is based off the yokai Fudokuchi Onna, which is a woman that has like this mouth at the back of her head that is constantly hungry and uses her hair to draw food back there. So it's said that you can tell if someone's a Fudokuchi Onna if you start noticing that her hair is pulling food into a mouth kind of behind her. Sneasel is also thought to be based on another of my favorite yokai. I have a lot of favorites. This is actually a group of 3 yokai called Kamai Tachi. And these ones are also basically sickle weasels. And they're just really, really interesting. I have no idea what their purpose is because they're so fast that it's a whirlwind around you that in a single moment, one of them will cut you up, the other one will try and rob you and cut you more, and the third one will come up behind with magic ointment to heal the bad wounds. So by the time they've gone, you feel like you just fell over and now you got up and get some bruises, but it's like, what's the point of cutting you and healing you, but they also steal from you at the same time. But it's just, I don't know, imagining this whirlwind of these little weasels holding sickles is just a really, really cool image. Solaas is also based off another one of the Yuki Onna, and she's another one of my favorites, the Snow Woman. She's another yokai, and she's just really cool. She's thought to be up in the mountains and will, possibly kill travelers going along. Naruto is another one that I really love Naruto. It has so much mythology in it. Pretty much a lot of Sasuke and Itachi, the Uchiha clan attacks are named after or somewhat based on some of the gods. You have Amaterasu, Tsukiyomi, Susanoo, Izanagi, and Izanami. They end up ultimately fighting Princess Kaguya, who is one of the very, very popular Japanese legends. She's basically on the equivalent of Cinderella story for them. Obviously, Orochimaru is based off of Yamato no Orochi, the 3 seinen, and the Pervy Sage is basically based off the seinen myth itself, and then the toads that they do the contract with. The boss toad is Gama Buta, which is the companion to the seinens. There's also, obviously, the Kitsune, and with Gaara, the Tanuki. But it's just really interesting to see all the different legends that are within Naruto. So this is one of my favorite. I cannot express enough about this game. This game is called Okami. I feel it's a little underrated. The graphics of the game are traditional style Japanese, and pretty much if you want just an introduction to myth and legends, play this game. It has so many legends in it. You'll even run into yokai. You play as this white wolf who is basically the embodiment of Amaterasu. And as you're going through the story, you end up having this really fun little character that's, you know, only about an inch high, fights with a small needle for a sword, and his name is Isum. And Isum joins you and is like your little companion, but it's more like a little flea hopping on your back. And there's a part in the game where you have to sneak into a place, and to do that, you have to go through a hole about yay high. So you have to go get a magical hammer, and the hammer can shrink you or make you grow. And it's kind of funny because when you do get the hammer and go back to the hole, Easton will ask you, all right, Ami, you ready to get hammered? So this one, it has so many different legends. The entire time you're going through the story, you're basically going through the story of how Susanoo defeated Yamato no Orochi. Yes?
There was also a sequel to this called Okami Den for the DS. In my opinion, it's just as good as the original, though that opinion can vary depending on who plays it. Both games actually got a Let's Play by a Let's Player known as Joe Conroy, and he goes very deep into the mythologies around these characters as he's playing through the games. If you guys are interested in Let's Plays, I highly suggest checking out Joe Conroy's Let's Play. Let's Play of both games.
Yep. And the second game is also done in the same amazing art style. But yes, both of those games are definitely something to check out for. Especially with the first one, it also goes over a lot of these other legends. Like you run into Momotaro, who is this little boy born from a peach, and he went to defeat the demons of Demon Island, which is actually a place you visit there. And you have to defeat them. And along the way, Momotaro finds these companions. He becomes friends with a dog, a phoenix, and a monkey. You even find Kintaro, which is another boy who was known for his strength, and he grew up in the forest wrestling all the forest animals and had a giant axe, and he also went off to defeat demons. And you even run into Princess Kaguya herself, and you help her return to the moon, just like in the story. So it's definitely something really cool to check out. So yeah, that's basically it, just an introduction. If you have any questions or yes.
Well, also another anime manga that goes into a lot about yokai myths and stuff is Inuyasha. Like, you know, Shippo.
Yeah.
He's pretty much, you know, the kitsune. You literally have, you know, Hachiemon, who is a tanuki. What else? Yeah, plenty of dogs in there.
Yuri and Hair is also more like a Japanese ghost story as well.
I read one called Inspectra, which seemed pretty interesting about the goddess of the yokai of knowledge and something, who has to sacrifice their left leg and right eye, or it might be the reverse of that. But they worship her, although the character in there is a bit of a pervy girl who wants to get in her boyfriend's pants, who you later find out he's kind of immortal and can see the future.
That sounds really cool.
Check it out, it is good. It was a novel and then the manga came.
I'll have to. A lot of them actually come from a combination of China and Japan. There are some myths that date early back, and it's really interesting to try and track it back because some of it's a bit hard, but there are two books, the Kojiki and I forget the other one, but it starts with an N, and they are some of the earliest books that have the earliest myths recorded, and that's definitely one to check out. A lot of the yokai, it's not that much known where a lot of them come from, but one author to check out for that is Lofcadio Hearn, and he is an American that around the 1800s went to Japan, and he even married a beautiful Japanese woman, and they even gave him a Japanese name, which unfortunately I forget. But his works, actually because of him going to the far countrysides of Japan and gathering all these stories, it created a resurgence in love for yokai. But his is one to check out. A lot of the Fox legends do originate from China. A lot of the Buddhist myths also originate from China and India, from when some Japanese tradesmen went to China, and then some of the Chinese Buddhist monks came over and were trying to convert. So it's just really interesting to see, but a majority of the myths are just adaptations from other cultures.
Yeah, they mentioned something in Spectra that yokai are make-believe, but they only get their physical form after years of belief. It takes hundreds of years, because now with internet you can spread a rumor and it becomes real to people. They do a little story plot with that.
Slenderman.
Yep, like Slenderman. It is, Japanese have a big belief in spirits, kami. Part of Shinto is they do believe that the rocks, trees, rivers, everything has a spirit within it that lives. So that's why there will be these different areas that are revered and respected. And it's also believed in some things that the more belief it's had, the stronger that a kami can get. So if it's a shrine that, you know, it was respected and revered a long time ago, but now it's fallen to the wayside, that the kami can become forgotten and they can grow less powerful.
There's a couple of anime that do that specific phenomenon too. Noragami is one of them, which is a newer one, and Natsume in the Book of Friends.
Yes. It's just really interesting. Once you know some of the basics, you can start going out and looking, and you realize how much there is out there and just how much it's still within the culture and just exists to this day. It's really cool. I love doing all this research. It's also an excuse to buy more books, but I've got like 16 different books on the whole subject. But it's just, I would say definitely go out, do research, read. Don't just stop at what you read on one website. I would find at least 3 different websites that have the same story and compare them, and take everything, any story that's out there is, everyone is going to hear it and take from it differently. So read, experience, learn, take what you can from it, and just go out and have fun.
Also, another kind of recent anime, Ozoki's Cool Headedness, which deals with like a whole bunch of demons that, you know, afterlife of, you know, what Japan believes in. Also kind of delves a little bit into like what other people believe in the afterlife, so everything is like separate, but you know, the whole idea of like, you know, you go to the afterlife, you get judged. They have like, they make reference to Momotaro and like all the other, you know, past legends that are pretty familiar in, you know, Japanese culture.
I'll definitely have to check that one out too. I love getting new references.
If you also like something a little bit more lighthearted and funny and really, honestly, the most hilarious anime I've ever seen, Ghost Stories actually has quite a few like Japanese ghost stories that are real in there. It's pretty good.
I've heard about that. I've honestly been meaning to check that one out.
It's like 24 episodes, and the anime bombed so hard in Japan that they gave it to the English dubbers and were like, literally do whatever you want with this. we just want to make some kind of money. And then they pretty much made what would be the equivalent, like the only requirements that they had to keep the title, and they had to keep the overarching plot. And the character's names. So then you had those three things, and they pretty much made Ghost Stories abridged. But it was the series, it was amazing. It does have a lot of like adult content in it, but it's hilarious and got some really creepy myths in there too.
I'll have to look at that. If you like creepy stuff, there's a manga that I stumbled upon in doing research for the After Dark panel. But it's called Ibitsu, and it features a few scary stories, but it's based on the Twisted Lolita legend about you'll find this young girl that's in Lolita garb, and she'll ask you a question. Whatever she asks you, under no circumstances are you to talk to her, because no matter what answer she gives you, because normally she'll ask you, do you have a little sister? No matter what you say, she'll become your obsessive little sister and follow you constantly until she deems, no, you're not the perfect sibling, and you'll meet a twisted end. But Ibitsu's definitely want to check out, because that's the next one I'm going to check out and buy.
A nice scary one. I'm not sure if it's based off a myth, Hell Girl. Basically, like it turned into a website, but it goes back in time where you write a letter, and this girl will kill whoever you hate or despise. In exchange, she gets your soul, and you go to hell.
Yes, that one is on my list.
That one also has at least one yokai, which is the chariot, the flaming chariot.
Yes, that one. It's one of the transports for the yokai, and itself is a living thing, so it's kind of creepy because basically you're crawling inside of it. So, but anything else? Yes.
Okay, Requiem from the Darkness. That was another show I tried to remember. That also deals like it came on like it's recent, but it came on maybe like 5 years ago. But it's about this writer in the Edo period trying to like get down ghost stories. So he actually experienced a lot of things that are, legends that you would know about in, Japanese myth and stuff like that. So there was definitely like an episode about, someone, it was a tanuki that transformed into like this person, they were like committing crimes or whatever. So that was also another interesting series.
I'll have to look at that. I know I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why do you think it is that with the Japanese yokai, it's just the mirror opposite of what you would get in any other part of the world, whereas you have people who turn into monsters, whereas you have monsters that turn into people?
That I'm not sure. Part of it could just be, kind of the trickery and the deception that are you going to suspect more a human, or just it could still be something of that thing where it's like you try to make it more relatable, but I think maybe it could just be the deception kind of part, or maybe they are themselves trying to fit in. So, all right, well, I guess that's about it. Thank y'all so much for getting up this early and coming out, and I really hope y'all have a